Do you have my new role on there?
Um,
It's
I
okay if you don't. It's just good to know what I'm.
right now it says software quality engineer
Oh,
because
that is
that's
my
what
new
your
role.
your Slack says.
Sick.
So good. I tried to double check against what people have mentioned. So Raza viewers, if you're wondering what Ella's role is, she's a software quality engineer. Quality software quality engineer. Jiminy cricket. Um, I have not had my usual allocation of coffee this morning. So if I say ridiculous things, I'm going to blame it all on that.
That's it.
Uh, so, Ella, do you want to? I know you've been on the office hours before, but no, I know not everybody watches every episode. So, would you like to introduce yourself and talk about what it is that you do at Raza?
Yeah, totally. Hi everyone. I am Ella. You probably see me on the forum. I have been pretty active there for a very long time. Been at Raza for more than 2 years now. And these days, I am working in the infrastructure team of engineering, which means that I mostly work with our testing, so doing QA testing, writing automated tests in general, just like automation for lots of different processes that we have that hopefully help to improve our product and improve kind of the automated testing so that we can catch things earlier and fix lots of bugs. So that's kind of what my role is now.
Testing is so important.
It is.
And I am delighted that you do the work that we benefit from. It's great.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I used to work kind of in a customer facing role. And so I have lots of experience with kind of the customers that we work with, the use cases they have, the way that they use our product, and things like that. And I'm able to kind of bring that into the testing and make sure that we're, testing for the workflows that people are using and things like that, which I think is helpful.
yeah, definitely. It's Data Science in Holland says hi. Hi. Um, I am always delighted by just the sheer variety of things that people build with Raza and the different, users they're serving and the different things they're doing. um, yeah, is there any do you have a favorite Raza assistant that you can talk about publicly? Understanding that we, of course, want to respect all of our customer facing NDAs.
Yeah. I mean, I think the ones that like really excited me, especially were the like at the beginning of the pandemic when
Mm.
people kind of took charge to like make use of conversational AI to like help people get information about COVID. So I
Mm.
know that we were like working with a few groups and just like saw tons of bots out in the wild, as one might say, just like giving people information about like like what are the rates, like how do I know if I have symptoms, how do I keep track of symptoms like over time, um, looking for vaccination centers, things like that. I feel like they've been continually going as the world is kind of like going through this crisis of just like how can we help people have access to information that everyone needs. And I saw lots of those and they're very cool.
Definitely. And I think that's, and I do say that, Data Science in Holland has a good point, but, or a good question. Um, but something that I think like COVID related assistants in particular are good for are populations where like filling out a form and having like the manual dexterity to like click a specific button or like knowing the difference between a radio button and a check mark, and just having all of that background knowledge or like being able to navigate through a series of web pages to get the specific piece of information that you need. I think there's skills that a lot of people working in software sort of take for granted, but if you have something that you really need to be accessible to everybody, those are specialized learned skills that not everyone has learned. People are in the process of learning. People have different expectations. So I think that conversational interfaces can really, really help in that situation where you really need to reach everybody.
Yeah, I know that like there was one, for example, that was gave an interface for people to understand if they were applicable for the benefits from the government. And like it was in a place where like some of the population that were looking for that or that was looking for that information wasn't like super literate, I guess, where being able to read things, but it was mostly a button-based bot, so that users didn't have to kind of type in what they wanted. They can just kind of follow this flow of like simple information about me and my situation to understand if I qualify for kind of supplement from the government, which I think was very interesting.
Definitely. Alex says hi. Howdy. Through Science in Holland says, in the previous episode, you mentioned that no influence of entities for intent prediction. On top of that, could you explain what the usage of use entities within intents in the domain file? Yeah. I think this was me saying something wrong in the past. So I believe by default, entities are included in intent prediction unless you switch the flag so that they are not. And I think I said the wrong thing.
So I guess it depends on which prediction you're talking about. So if you're talking about intent prediction, and like entities influencing that would be part of Diet's transformer architecture, right? And that is something that if you wanted to turn that off, that's something that you would do in your config. So you can turn off the kind of using Diet for entities. You can have Diet as just an intent classifier and then have a separate CRF entity extractor. So that's with regards to the actual like NLU prediction of entities. What the domain file stuff for is for the dialogue prediction. So basically by default, if you have a story that says, if I get a greet intent, then I'm going to greet back. And then you also have a name entity. If you get a message that has a greet intent and a name entity, and you don't have a story that handles that, by default, it won't follow that original story. And the kind of idea behind that is like, if you get a greet intent with a name, then you might do something different. You might greet them by their name if that's like a separate response that you have. So that's the default behavior. If you want to turn that off and say, whenever users greet me, I don't care if they say their name, I don't care if they provide an email or a number, I'm just going to do the same thing. You can say use entities false. If you want to only care about the name, but want to make sure that if you get some other entity like an email, it doesn't confuse the bot, then you can say, for this one, I just want to use entity name. So it gives you a way to kind of distinguish which like entities being picked up in a message should help you split dialogues. If you're looking for like a super scalable way to manage that without confusing your bot, I would actually recommend starting your intents by ignoring all entities. And then if you come to a point in your conversation where you say, okay, actually, if I want to subscribe to the newsletter with no entity and subscribe ella@raza.com to the newsletter and go down different paths, then you can say, I want to turn that on.
And a related thing that is pretty much brand new, so I'm just gonna like insert it here, is conditional response variations. So this would be for the situation like Ella mentioned where you want to say something different if you have the name slot. You no longer have to create a bunch of dialogues for that. If based on a slot you have the same conversational pattern, but you want your bot to produce different text and send it to the user, you can use conditional responses. And I believe these are in 2.6 is the first version that has them. Does that sound right? That sounds right to me. So, and they look like this. So in your responses, this is the default response. And you can also specify a condition. And when the condition is fulfilled, then you get the alternative response. So specifically for the use case, like a very narrow part of all of the use cases that I just talked about, this might help. And I know that's tangential to the original question, but it's new. I want to talk
It's a cool
about it.
feature. Yeah, no, totally. I agree. And this comes up so much more often than you would expect it to. So the way that I usually talk to like customers or teams about using this is that if you have a slot, and the only thing that it changes is the words of the response. And that like actual slot value doesn't even need to be part of the response, right? It could be the slot is, are you 18 or older? And then the value could be, actually, this is a bad example. That's a good example of the other case. If it's like, I don't know, if you are
maybe you have like a slot for whether your bot uses like the formal or the informal way of addressing
something
the user.
like that. It's like, if the way that the dialogue is going to flow doesn't actually depend on it, it's just like, we have something that, for example, we can help users migrate from different tools. So if the user says they want to migrate from Luis, then we tell them, okay, here are the instructions for how to migrate to or from Luis. Here are the instructions how to migrate from Dialogflow. But like in each of the cases, it's just the user either says, I want to migrate, we ask them what, and then it comes back, or they say, I want to migrate from this directly. And we just give them a different response, and then we go on with our day. That value that they provided isn't going to affect the rest of the conversation. So instead of writing stories for all these different paths, you can kind of handle that with one. In the case where, for example, like it's about an age where you're allowed to use the service or not, then you could store that slot, and then if the user is underage, you can say like, sorry, I can't provide this service to you, and then that will go in a completely different direction from the other one, which might start doing a form to collect information or something like that.
Also, side note, it said Louise.
Sorry?
I've been saying Lewis.
I don't know.
Okay. It's one of those things where I think I've only ever
it just
read
looks
it
like
before.
Luis to me, so that's what I say, I guess. But
I'm gonna go with your way.
I mean, we've been remote first online for so long that I don't know if I've ever heard anyone else say it.
Same.
It's not usually a meeting topic, more just something that's part of the bot that we're talking about in a PR or something. That's funny.
Yeah. And if any of y'all know, like the most common way of saying it, I would like to say it right. I am well known for just guessing at how words are said and doing it wrong. Question from Amina. Good to see you. Can we talk a little bit about end-to-end learning, please? I feel like you need a story per question/intent. And why do we want to remove intents? I like the way it is. I think it's clear and easy to manage, edit, explain.
I think that I agree with you for the most part. I like the idea of intents to categorize things that are all supposed to be treated the same way. I think the idea behind end-to-end is that sometimes you get a message that doesn't really fit in an intent, or maybe it only in that context of that message makes sense to kind of like continue on that way. And so it's nice to have the versatility to add that as an extra kind of piece of information going in. I don't remember if you pull up like the original, like I guess release blog or something. Alan had like a good example of.
I want this one.
That.
Nope, this one's
I
too
thought
late.
it was a very.
The example that I like to use a lot is like ciao or aloha. So something that can be in either an if I move it here, will that change it there? It won't. Fantastic. So something that could be either in a greet or a farewell intent,
Mhm.
and is a good example of both. Like, it would be correct to have it in both. But from a machine learning standpoint, you can't say that the exact same thing can correctly be put into two categories if the point of your model is to pick one category, right?
Yeah, I
So
think I remember Alan's now. It was basically a restaurant bot that can suggest things to you. So it's saying, it's like, oh, what food do you want? And then the bot is saying, like, how about sushi, for example? And normally you could say yes or no, but you might also say, I had that yesterday, which probably means no. But that's not something that you're going to add to your deny intent, because it's not always no, and it also like feels like it would skew things. So it's sort of like in the context of this conversation, that is going to add, yeah, that's going to be a no. But instead of categorizing that in your story as like, this means no, you just skip that step. You just say, okay, well, if they say this, then this is what we do. We happen to be doing the same thing as if the user said no, but we're gonna like not make that classification.
And I would say, in general, intent classification as an approach works for most turns of a conversation in this sort of task-oriented framework, but there are turns for which it doesn't work. And by forcing your system to always do a classification at every step, you can result in lower overall system performance. So this is really helping, giving you a way and tools to handle those situations. And for like a very simple prototype, you might like not ever come up onto it, but particularly once you're, practicing CDD and seeing the wonderful variety of ways in which people interact with your system, you're probably going to run into situations like this.
Yeah. And I think with regards to the kind of initial question about having to make a story for every single thing a user could say, I think like conceptually, if you were to kind of do it all end to end, you're like kind of right. And I don't think that's the way that we mean it to be used at the moment. It's more of an experimental feature of like, how can we make use of specific terms, like Rachel said, and also kind of like moving toward the idea of like, the 5 levels of conversational AI in both directions are a big thing that we talk about a lot, right? And we talk about the development complexity decreasing as much as the increase in the user experience with regards to like intuitive experiences. And I think with regards to end-to-end learning and like getting rid of intents and things like that, the idea comes with the actual like addition of, well, this is moving toward the future of like, hopefully instead of us having to go through and write stories ourselves, and having to write stories yourselves is kind of a burden. Having to put things into intents is sort of a burden. So in slowly allowing like NLU messages to just be part of the dialogue with regards to training, you can move toward that goal of just like having old conversations and just being able to train on conversations themselves without having to go in and break down what goes in this intent, what is this story structure. Just training a big machine learning model on conversations, which I think is a really exciting like future concept. And then again, definitely, one of the biggest things that the research team I think worked on, or maybe is still working on, is like getting good data sets for like dialogue and end-to-end conversation training in research, because there aren't that many out there.
No, there aren't. Yeah. There's actually a brand new one that was just announced.
And I know there are some that are like multi-turn but not very long, or there's some that's multi-user, which is like a little too much for a use case, and not just like good one-on-one back and forth conversations.
And this is the 5 levels that we talked about, and basically from an end user perspective, the higher up the level it is, the more like a human conversation it is, and the more it follows your expectations for how a human conversation can go. And from a developer experience level, the higher up you go, the more of the system is learned and generated from data and user data. And of course, there will always be work for like the machine learning engineering and part of it, but yeah. Data science, Sin Holland says, perfect answer, thanks. Oh, gold star, Ella.
Great.
I hope that wasn't patronizing. I'm just pleased.
I'm here for it.
Take
the appreciation where I can get it.
I bet we could like figure out something. I keep meaning to make more animations, and I just don't have energy.
Gold star.
Exactly. And from Amina, end-to-end looks like test stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very similar.
Yeah.
I think we can pull up an example.
I think they might look the same, actually. I think, I don't know, I am not super familiar with the training side of end-to-end, but I think that you can just take the exact same format and do it.
Yep. So you just say what the user says.
I guess in a test story, you provide the user message and the intent that it associates with.
True. Yes.
Which in an end-to-end story you don't, but.
And yeah, and I would really only use end-to-end once you are actually getting user turns that fall outside of your intent classification paradigm.
Yeah.
It's probably a better word than paradigm. That's what I came up with. We're gonna live with it.
I'm here for it.
Question from Data Science in Holland. IMO data quality plays a big role in bots. Do you have / recommend a way or tool to measure the quality of the data? For example, overlaps in data across different intents. Are there any algorithms you've come across? I feel like the NLU insights might be helpful here. Let's see if I can pull it up. So this is in Raza X, which is if you haven't used it before, Raza open source is our open source framework for building chatbots. Raza X is a free but not open source software tool for deploying and improving assistants over time. And one of the things that's in Raza X is this sort of like warning system for your intents and your classification, and you can set it to run routinely because you're usually going to be adding data, you're going to be annotating data, and it generates a report that like can help you find some of your data quality issues. And we also have like validation that might be helpful.
I think validation, at least with I think what they are asking is less about like exact overlaps, for example, but like trying to figure out which ones are maybe too similar and stuff like that. And I think that the intent insights is probably closer to that. And just the testing scripts in general, they'll give like a confusion matrix that can help you kind of discern which intents keep getting confused for one another, which might indicate that you have very similar intents or some crossover, things like that. But yeah, I know that, didn't Vincent also make a tool that helps you like visualize your NLU data or something like that?
The Rosalind project?
One of them. He's got so many projects. It's impressive.
He does. He does. So there's the Rosalind project, and then we have a bunch of like Jupyter plugins.
Yeah.
That are helpful. So this just launched, and this is an integration of Raza and Streamlit that helps you view your NLU components. And the other one, let's see if I can find it. But I would say also sort of the general question of how does your data affect your model is a difficult and sort of unsolved one in machine learning in general. So what I would look for, you know, intents that are having a hard time converging. So if you look at the training curve over epochs, it just doesn't, it takes a really long time to get to a stable, good place, or like it just never happens. And if there's two intents where that's happening, they might be overlapping and too close to each other in terms of the training data. And we've also been working with, sorry, I've got the Jupyter notebook thing here. So we also have a little bit of an evaluation thing in our docs. And I've also been in live coding on Fridays for the last couple weeks, just playing around with sort of a more statistical way, statistical in terms of statistical NLP from like the aughts, before everything got super deep, as just a quick way of doing sanity checks for kind of the opposite, not overlaps, but data that is super informative for particular intents. Yeah. Did you find the specific? Because I know there's a repository that we have.
Yeah. I also got a new computer, so all of the kind of links in my drop down aren't there anymore.
That's the worst. Oh, sorry, it was my phone. I thought it was a boat horn, and my first thought was
That
like,
was
how
like
the hell did
one,
a boat get in
just
here?
a really quiet little toot toot.
Yep, a little toy tugboat. Something like cosine similarity between two intents. Yep, you can definitely do that. I definitely feel like, let me poke around in GitHub. I'm just going to do that in another tab to make sure I don't accidentally show anything private. Yeah. Sorry, I'm scrolling through a lot of repos right now. Trying to find one specific that I don't remember the name of.
Yeah, that's always the...
What lies is really just for embeddings. So it's going to be too narrow.
That might have been what I was thinking about, though, actually, because that like it helps you visualize embeddings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's what I was thinking about.
There's Raza, but I'm pretty sure there was another side project Vincent was working on that would have been relevant here. And I'm on page 4. And I'm not having any growth luck on this. I might just have to put a pin in this. There's something in our GitHub that may be relevant, and that's where I think I'm going to leave this, because watching me scroll on a different page is not exactly riveting content. Yeah. Lewis says, Ella, quality check Rachel's bot. So the personal website bot I've been working on, it integrates with, you can run queries against a database backend. The database backend doesn't work. So most of the functionality doesn't work right now. I would be delighted to have you take a look at it, but I don't know that it's the best use of your time.
Yeah, for clarification, I guess when it comes to quality, I'm looking specifically at the like testing and automation of like our products. So like actually Rasa open source tests, like software tests, and same with Rasa X, and automation for every time we do a minor release, we've got QA passes and all that good stuff. So it's a fun time.
Amina has a question. Great question. How do the machine learning models pick the training and test data? And every time we do Raza train, does the model pick different data from the previous one? Is there cross-validation used? I believe you can specify this in your TensorFlow settings if you have a strong preference. Do we use stable training test sets? I think we resample. That's a maybe. I'm not 100% positive on that.
If we didn't use stable ones, then would you be able to set a random seed and still get reproducible results?
I would assume that the random seed would
set the weights, right?
No. I should also set the test train split.
Okay.
But if the random seed is not set, if it's set by default, then we probably use a stable split. And that would also make sense for fine tuning, because otherwise you'd have to have a separate process for fine tuning where we do set a stable split. I bet it's resplit every time you add new testing data, though. New data, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
I'm guessing. We could look at the source code, but I don't want to.
Be one level higher than I would immediately understand.
One more coffee, and then I'd be willing to do that. Yeah, is there cross-validation? If you do model validation, we definitely run the cross-validation. I don't know if it happens by default or not. These are very good questions. I would check the forum, because I imagine they've been discussed before. And I just don't have the... I want to see.
I mean, this is a question of like during training, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. Because I'm like, that's the part that I don't know about. Like the testing I can do.
Yeah. I think this is like the test train split when you're training your assistant.
Right.
Should I know? Yes. Do I? No. Yeah. Mina says, can we create two assistants and let them talk to each other with Raza to improve one or both? Ooh, you can. I would recommend against it in general, because sort of the empirical evidence points to assistants being trained on, chatbots being trained by other chatbots. You very quickly move away from human-like conversation and get into like weird repetitive loops. They say things humans wouldn't say. Human data and data from your users is always going to be your very best choice. So I would not do bot-bot interactions to generate training data. Unless you have a strong opinion otherwise, Ella.
No, I'm thinking about, someone posted a video at some point, I can't remember, but it's just like those they're like the AI assistants that are like really realistic human like models from like the chest up, and there's a video on YouTube somewhere of two of those like on two different screens. They have them like up toward each other, and they're talking to each other, and it's just like, it sounds so funny, and I don't know. It's good. I need to watch it again.
Yeah. I would say the exception would be if you are training something specifically to talk to assistants.
Right.
For like an art project or something.
That's kind of the thought that I had, is like, if you're trying to train something to talk like a human that doesn't talk like a human, like don't have it talk to something else that also not only doesn't talk like a human, but is also trying to learn from the other person to improve itself. It's like, you're just kind of falling deeper into a hole.
Yeah. I get where you're coming from, though. And it's definitely, like, it is something that people have researched, because they were like, maybe that would be a good idea. Turns out it's not. And I've scrolled too far. Lewis is also like, I probably wouldn't recommend it. Mike says, I think Amina might be talking about taking the output of one bot and setting it to the API of the other, and vice versa. If you just want to connect to assistants, we actually do have an example of that in the help desk bot. So, and I'm gonna pull that up in this one again, just so I don't accidentally show anything private. worked on help desk, right?
Sorry?
Right?
A little bit.
I've forgotten how to use prosody in my native language. So this example assistant that now you can see on our GitHub, it's github.com/razahq/helpdesk-assistant, has an example of bot-bot handoff. So like somebody's talking to one assistant and now they're talking to another. Data Science in Holland says, I think QBox, sorry to mention a company, that's fine, is using testing bots to test bots. I would say testing is different from data generation. So this would be, I'm assuming like something like in production, I have my assistant here, I'm using the service to have a second assistant, bot, whatever, that I know what it's going to do and I know what my expected responses from my assistant are. And I think it sounds like the benefit of using a bot there is that you don't have to like write and maintain your own tests. You just sort of tell them what you want. But I would say we do the same thing with like Raza testing.
Yeah, I think where they're coming from, it's a little more of a step that I could understand is like if you have, I think it could maybe test like the recovery of the bot a bit better. So basically being like, I have a script that just says like, I say hello, and then I expect the bot to say this, and then I say, I'm having a good time. I expect the bot to say this. And it's like, I guess if you have a bot on that end, then instead of pre-writing what your bot is going to say, your testing bot is like, you're putting that input based on what the bot came from, or sorry, what the bot gave back. And so maybe if the bot makes a mistake, then it can still like recover from that and end up at a successful ending versus like our assumptions right now is if the bot predicts an incorrect action, then we kind of qualify that as a failure. So I don't know, could be interesting.
I could also see it for like pen testing. So seeing if you can do SQL injection or something.
Yeah.
Lewis says, what are some of the tests for Raza X since they're kept secret from us?
I don't know. They're not very exciting. Test a bunch of different endpoints with a bunch of different data and, that good stuff. But like one of the things that we want to work on, for example, is kind of extending those like data sets that we test on with regards to like different languages and things like that so that we can more easily catch like if the API or the UI for some reason is like having trouble splitting this input into different tokens or something like that, where we expect it to and where we want it to for our users. Even though we don't have the time to like manually create test instances for 50 different languages, that's something that you can use automated testing for. So that's like kind of an exciting project that I think I'll be working on.
Yeah, I think that'll be very helpful for folks.
Yeah.
Data Science in Holland says, rules versus stories. You recommend writing stories for lengthy flows, but some flows we have a fixed path which feels like a rule. For example, in a WhatsApp bot, sorry, I'm having trouble reading, where the users use numbers, 1, 2, or 3, to select intents along the flow. From talking with other people, this seems very common in WhatsApp.
Right. WhatsApp doesn't support buttons. So if you want to have any sort of just like, which option do you want thing, it's often that people will kind of use that to simplify it.
So like an IVR vibe.
Yeah.
Most of the time, the bot gets confused in the middle of the conversation and predicts the wrong response. That might be interesting. So it's predicting the wrong response from the number that's been put in. If you have like a long series of interactions.
So my guess of how this question was asked, if you're like giving different numbers for like, here are the different things I can help you with, basically different like entry points into a conversation, then yeah, you'd need some stories to like handle kind of the different ways those might be asked. If you're more using stories as like options in a kind of singular flow of, you're in a form and you're trying to like ask the user different pieces of the form where they couldn't just like come back to it, um, then that would be a different case. But if it was the first one, then you're sort of thinking of it in the way of like a bot might say, like, here are the things I can help you with, and those are all different entry points of the story.
I might use checkpoints for that.
Yeah, it might be confusing to just like get a number in the middle of a conversation if it's not associated with anything.
Yeah, let me roll this up. Yeah, it also might be. It almost sounds like it could be an NLU problem. Right? Because it sounds like what's happening, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is that somebody's putting in a number that has an intent associated with it, and the number is being mapped to an incorrect intent, and as a result, the bot is doing something unpredicted or unpredictable. I could be wrong though.
Yeah, it could also be that the intent is right, but it's at a point in the conversation that you weren't expecting it, or you're in the middle of another flow and then people are trying to access a different skill, which is something that we can handle. You just need to kind of like write what an interruption might look like. And when you're done with that, do you go back to the existing one or do you just drop it? All those questions.
Yeah. I hope that helps. Yeah, my sort of general recommendation is use rules for one turn things. And if you're collecting a bunch of information, use a form, which is now a special type of rule.
Forms rock.
Yeah.
That's my recommendation. I'm not super familiar with rules because I think that with regards to just my role, I was working and creating bots a lot before Raza 2.0, and I've been doing less of it after, so I have less rules experience. But forms have been around for a while, and I love those.
Yeah, forms are great.
They're just very configurable to like lots of different behaviors that you're trying to capture. I think it's very helpful.
Jayton, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, says, hello, please make a video on Raza with AWS. There is, one of our community members wrote a tutorial that might be helpful. Yeah, I make no promises, but I will take it into consideration.
I would be interested in what they're looking to kind of gather, because I know that like if you're just trying to do Raza open source on like an AWS instance or something, like on an EC2, like it probably is not very much different from any other platform. But if you're looking to, if you're looking to use ECS, that's a whole complicated thing. I've been there. So yeah.
Yeah. Block the spammer. Another question from Kaduchi. I'm so sorry if I said that wrong. Are there any ways of handling distributed training? For example, using Spark for the data pipeline. Ooh, Spark specifically. We do have GPU configuration. Let's see if I can
so for anyone else in the chat who also does not understand like I do, what is distributed training?
Oh, so
like splitting it up into batches, and I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm making a guess.
So I have not used Spark, but my understanding is that it is for extremely large data and being able to handle basically you have like lots of different computers that are doing the training and are ingesting this like large amount of data, but they're all making updates to the same assistant. I think that's what is meant by distributed learning here. Let's see if I can find this. we definitely have like a lot of availability for being able to do specify how your model training is configured, and I can't find it right now just at my fingertips, but it's a TensorFlow model, so any sort of parallelization or distribution you could do with the TensorFlow model, you can do with a Raza open source model. I hope that answers your question. Amina says, you recommended using a character level model to deal with misspellings. It helps, but I don't get when it works. Max n-gram equals 15 gives best results. Should I increase it? Can you explain to me how it works? It's like a Mexican standoff, in Western movies where it's like, who's gonna go first? Do you want to go first?
I could try. It would be a guess, honestly. But if you have a better idea.
Yeah. So 15, I would say, would be a bit big for English. But if you're using another another language that tends to have longer words with more tokens in them, then I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, those
English
don't
tends to have
go over word boundaries, right? They only happen inside.
Traditionally they do, but I don't know about with our particular framework.
I don't think they do in ours.
No.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. So the way it works is, instead of just looking at like the whole word all at once, your n-gram window slides across the word, and you consider each of those chunks separately. And the benefit there is that if these chunks map to a token you know about, and these chunks map to a token you know about, but there's a typo in the middle and this chunk doesn't, you can still sort of like get the same information out. Is sort of the very general intuition there. Yeah. And in general, it's going to work better if, well, actually, that's max n-grams, so it might go like starting with bigrams and then stepping up through all of them. I don't know enough about the implementation details.
Yeah, there's a min n-gram and a max n-gram parameter. I think the default is 1 and 4. So like if you're only passing a max, then there's probably a min of 1 already. So that would be looking at like each kind of 1 character as a unit, and then each 2 characters, and 3, 4. And so I'm guessing that's taking longer to train. But yeah, probably more robust to misspellings, I would say.
Yeah. I hope that helps. Jatin, again, sorry if I said that wrong, about AWS, it would be great because we can go globally within seconds using Raza enabled AWS. Yeah. I will take it under consideration. We've got so much content we want to make, but I'll keep that in mind. Thank you for sharing. Data Science in Holland said, this is a question we've been talking about. I don't think you and me, but like I've been talking about with other people internally. We have more than 100 Q&As attached to response selectors. Would it be fine if I did incremental training after adding 1 more Q&A to the pool? Oh, that's not exactly the question.
No, which one
talking about internally.
That sounds like a great use of incremental training if I understand the feature. It's like you don't need to retrain the whole bot just to be able to like answer. Well, actually, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how it interacts with response selector. Yeah.
That's also what I was thinking about.
Because it's basically creating another model, a separate model from your like NLU model, just in general, that does the prediction of which kind of response to give based on the question. And if you're adding just like a
Class.
new, completely new question, I don't think it can know how to make that prediction.
Without updating everything.
Yeah, I thought that was the like adding more kind of examples to a question that you had. But if you're adding a new question, then I think no.
Yeah. Because I think all the training data within the response selector is used to identify whether or not to trigger the response selector.
Mm-hmm.
So it would depend on how specifically it's implemented, and I don't have those details.
Yeah, but I think when it comes to regular intents, for example, there's a specific kind of encoding of the different intents used to classify them. And so like if you add a new one, then it needs to be retrained because like all of the kind of lengths of things need to be different and et cetera, et cetera. And I would presume that there would be something similar for the response selector, not only just conceptually, but also because the response selector and the diet classifier share an no, that's not true. TED and the diet classifier share an architecture. Response selector is a different architecture. I'm not sure about that.
We're in the details, huh?
Yeah, we really just jumped into NLU, and this is my 100% least expertise topic, but that's okay.
Maybe is my answer. It depends on the specific implementation, and I don't have that to hand. But you can go look at it.
Does Rasa open source let you do it? I don't know. Try it. Is it a good idea? I also don't know.
If you can use incremental training, I would.
Yeah. Just try it. Yeah. If it doesn't let you, then there might probably be a reason why, and that might be the reason. Could be another reason that I don't know anything about. But yeah, worth a try.
Yeah. And Raza open source is really good about warnings.
Yeah.
You'll know. Which is great. I love it.
Yeah.
That's a good question. Amina says, my assistant will recognize misspelled words, so the form will be activated. Great. But the slot will be filled with a misspelled word. Is there a way to fix this? Can the assistant correct the user in a way? So
ran into this question too.
If the misspelled word is an entity, I would probably use a synonym.
So yes and no. I ran into the same kind of question and had a long conversation about it. I think it's a question that still needs to be answered. The kind of reason there is that if you are going to use a synonym, then you basically have to have a synonym for every possible misspelling, right? Because the difference between the synonym and like the entity extraction itself is that the synonym mapper is completely role-based, right? So like diet is robust to that misspelling because of the character featureize that we already talked about. And so it probably won't have an issue extracting that entity at all. But the synonym mapper only takes the rules that you pass it. So I think that that's an existing issue that like our research team knows about. And I think we need to come up with a better solution to do that. That being said, what I have seen from people in the past is adding a custom component to specifically process just the entities. Like you don't have to send all of your messages through it, but you could, for example, either have a custom component that is running like a spell check on your extracted entities, or you could do some sort of fuzzy matching with your entities and your synonyms. So like if you have a bunch of synonyms for, all of your entity values already, you could check an extracted entity against your synonyms and say, either is this close enough to one of my existing synonyms that I should replace it, or which one is closest and I will automatically replace it. Kind of the implementation is up to you whether you expect things outside of your synonyms and want to handle them, and only fix things that are close enough, or if you want to just like automatically switch to the thing that's close enough. But yeah, I think that that's not a solved question at the moment. And I personally just wonder, if kind of the robustness of character featureization could be applied somehow to the synonym mapper, like on a kind of machine learning level of like making the synonym mapper somehow use machine learning instead of just rules, but I don't know.
Also, as Ella was talking, I realize I've done this. I've done it in live coding. Yeah, and this is how I did it. I had a database of acceptable responses, and then I just used fuzzy matching.
Yeah.
And by database, I mean I hand wrote a dictionary in my Python action because it just wasn't that big.
Sure. But yeah, that's exactly what I'm
no.
saying, right? It's like instead of putting every possible misspelling in your dictionary list, you're just like, well, I guess I'll fuzzy match and make sure that something gets picked up. Also, you have dissonance there by your mouse.
Oh, yeah, I can't spell. This also maybe looks wrong. I don't know.
I think that's right, actually.
Really?
No,
wow.
second guessing myself.
Yeah, I am not one to trust about spellings.
Yes.
Yeah, and then there's Gudishay recommends checking out the Raza whiteboard playlist about it. Yeah, that would be helpful.
Oh yeah, there's a whole series on misspellings. It's true.
And yeah, Medici, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. I'm just sort of guessing. Also talking about creating a custom component. So yeah, it might be helpful. Amina has a question for Ella. Do you have to understand the language to be a software quality engineer?
That's a good question. So as I presume you mean like the language that assistants are written in and stuff like that. Yeah, so very interesting. As a software quality engineer, I don't really interact as much with like assistants with what I was talking about extending data sets. Usually like test data, you don't particularly need to know things about, because the like expectation of here is what the result should be is part of the test. So, if you have a string of Japanese characters and then you're running a tokenization test, you already have from some other source, whether it be my colleague who knows Japanese or the data set that I got it from online, like already tells me this is how it needs to be tokenized. So I can just run that through the test and do it like that. So kind of languages of training and testing data aren't as much of a thing that are a big deal when it comes to automated testing. However, when I was working with, customers and different assistants and stuff like that, it definitely helps to understand languages of your assistants. So I speak German, for example. So I work with some of the German bots and know enough German that I was able to provide like data recommendations on a Dutch bot, although I don't speak Dutch. It sort of looks the same. And handing that off to a non-German speaking colleague, it's like, oh, we need to run some NLU tests on this, but we need to actually tag some of these entities because we're going to take this intent and split it by entity. It's like, well, if you don't actually know which words in this sentence are going to be tagged as that entity, it's like, that's not great. Like, we need someone who understands this. So yeah, it's definitely an asset to be able to kind of understand different languages of bots that we're working with. And yeah, I know that some of our customers have like lots of different languages and things like that. But that being said, I also, that's mostly with like NLU recommendations, which I give less of. But, I've given recommendations on like an upgrade to 2.0 or like, restructuring of the domain with a bot in French that I know nothing about. And it's like, in that case, you're mostly looking at kind of categorization and flows for conflicts and things like that, and less about the language itself. So some of it can be done without understanding. And I guess the other kind of insight that it gives you, if you're doing a bot that's not in a language that you understand, is like understanding how the bot processes the information and how it makes its decisions. So this is like an example that I give a lot of people where they're saying like, my bot can understand this question and this question because I've trained it to do that. But when my user asks this completely irrelevant question, like my bot should know that it's not this one or that one. It's like, well, if you give me, Portuguese data, and it's like, well, here's how you ask this question, here's how you ask this question, and you gave me another string, it's like, I don't know, is this another way to ask question A or question B, or is it a completely irrelevant question? I actually don't have enough information to know that, because maybe it's just an idiom that doesn't share any of the words in the data set, but actually does mean question A. So that's the sort of thing that it gives you a little bit of a step back of like, if you don't have the vocabulary, then you can only work on the information that you're given, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I think that was an excellent answer, and I hope that helps to answer your question, Mina. Oh, she says, thanks you guys, always great being a part of the office hours, and it helps me a lot. Well, thanks for coming. It's always great to have you.
Glad we're helpful.
Dusansa Holland also says, question. Should we put alike questions, intents, into one selector to keep the distance between the response selectors? So there might be an imbalance between the size of the different selectors.
I don't think an imbalance between the selectors
shouldn't matter.
matters.
Yeah, and if you have a lot of questions that are very similar, I would sort your selectors by sort of semantic.
Yeah, so like chit chat versus FAQs.
Yeah. Or even like questions about the banking app, questions about the loan app, Yeah. I think it'll be an easier problem from a machine learning standpoint. And they say, thank you very much. These sessions help us a lot. You're very welcome. Thank you for joining. And it is, I think, a little bit past 10 now. So I don't want to go too much into Ella's evening.
Dinner time.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you for joining, folks. Thanks for joining, Ella. Sorry about my general state, but I hope it was still helpful. We'll be back tomorrow with a paper reading group. We're reading something that on its surface looks like it might not be chatbot related, which is automatic recommendations for email responses, but I think actually is very related. So I think that'll be an interesting paper. And then on Friday, we're going to continue working on this sort of like statistical modeling stuff. And I'm going to try and go through and clean it up and get it to the point where other folks could use it in a pretty simple way without having to know a whole bunch of R. So that's my goal for that. So you can.
Gosh, R. It's been a long time since I've done that.
I love R, especially like if you're just making graphs. It's so much easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much. Thank you, Ella. Thank you, Rasa community. I will see you tomorrow, and Ella will see you on the forums. Honestly, probably.
It's true. I'll be there.
Absolutely.